He was her rival strategist. But when the pulse grenade dropped, she shielded him with her shifting body. The polished alloy hallway shimmered with a lattice of indigo security beams, a beautiful, lethal puzzle that only one mind on Veyron Station could have crafted. Rowan pressed his back to the chilled floor, the faint hum of the station's power core vibrating through his spine. His eyes traced the crisscrossing lights above, some steady, others pulsing in hypnotic rhythm. This was Lyra's handiwork, unmistakable in its elegance. Each beam was angled with mathematical precision, spaced according to a sequence Rowan recognized. Fibonacci, her signature. Even without seeing her, Rowan could sense Lyra's presence. She was somewhere behind the walls, perhaps perched in a hidden control room, fingers flying over glass keys, eyes sharp and calculating. He felt her gaze like a current through the corridor, tracking his every heartbeat. Behind him, the informant, a young analyst with sweat slicking his brow, crouched in the half-shadow, eyes wide and glassy. "We're finished," the analyst whispered, voice trembling. "No one gets past this. I've seen what happens if—" "There's always a route," Rowan cut in quietly. He kept his tone calm, steady, a rock against the analyst's mounting panic. He had spent months mapping Lyra's logic, tracing her patterns like constellations in the void. She loved mirrored kill zones, nested traps disguised as safe corridors, the beauty of a perfectly balanced sequence. To beat her, gadgets were useless. He needed to think like her. He rummaged through his battered pack, fingers brushing aside coils of wire and a single outdated datapad, until he found what he needed: a cheap compact, its mirror cracked but serviceable, and a wind-up clock mouse. A child's toy, painted with faded stars. He twisted the key, the clockwork heart of the mouse ticking to life. Its tiny wheels jittered in anticipation. Rowan pressed the analyst's shoulder. "When I say move, you move. No second guesses, no hesitation. Got it?" The analyst's head bobbed, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped his comm badge. Rowan set the clock mouse on the floor. It blinked its painted eyes, then darted forward, whirring softly. Rowan angled the compact mirror with careful precision, catching the lowest beam and bouncing the indigo light upward, just enough to create a safe pocket. The mouse zipped under the next beam, its tiny form nearly lost in the latticework of light. It reached the fourth beam, a narrow gap, precisely the width of the mouse. There, it sputtered to a halt, gears winding down. "Now," Rowan breathed. The analyst bolted forward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Rowan shadowed him, weaving through the grid with practiced grace, ducking and leaping where needed, never breaking rhythm. The beams cast quicksilver patterns across his face as he moved. He snagged the mouse just in time, rolling beneath the final beam and landing in a crouch on the other side. Heart pounding, he risked a glance up at the nearest surveillance camera, knowing Lyra was watching, always watching. He offered a sly, irreverent wink, then snapped a pulse grenade from his belt and thumbed it. A hush fell as the device hissed, and the surveillance feed dissolved into static snow. Elsewhere, Lyra sat before a wall of flickering screens, the blue glow painting her angular features. Her supervisor's voice, calm, clipped, echoed in her mind. "The target's gone. The human Rowan has him. He bypassed the L-prime array." She reported the breach, mirror and toy, with icy professionalism, her words sharp and spare. Outwardly, she was the model officer, efficiency incarnate. But inside, something flickered, strange and unwelcome. He hadn't broken her system. He'd sidestepped her logic, danced through her numbers as if her traps were merely suggestions. Her supervisor's next directive flashed onto the screen: Astral Dynamics, the prototype quantum cell. Secure it before the Solarian Union. Failure is unacceptable. Lyra's hands hovered over schematics and shifting patrol logs, already recalculating, mind spinning through possibilities. But her thoughts snagged on Rowan's face, his brazen wink, his unpredictable compassion, the way he'd moved through her maze as if he knew her mind. She replayed the footage, hunting for a pattern in his disorder. But what she felt, a warm, disruptive pulse that lingered long after the static faded, couldn't be measured. The Astral Dynamics Vault's reinforced door vibrated under Rowan's fingertips, thrumming with the stored energy of a dozen overlapping locks. Each pulse was a warning, a promise that whatever waited inside was worth dying for. Rowan pressed his palm flat against the cool alloy, feeling the electric tension radiate up his arm. It had been a long sprint to get here, bluffing his way past two armed guards, spoofing a high-level access call with a cracked code slate, slipping through corridors that smelled of ozone and fear. Now, only this final barrier separated him from the prototype quantum cell, the object that had set the entire Solarian Union on edge. A whisper of motion behind him, soft, almost imperceptible, sent a jolt of adrenaline through Rowan's body. He spun, sidearm drawn and ready, breath held as the corridor's sterile light spilled over the figure stepping into view. Lyra emerged from the shadows, her presence both ethereal and arresting. Her translucent skin caught the overhead glow, scattering it into rainbow fragments that danced across the metallic walls. Her hair flowed in waves of liquid starlight, each strand shifting hues as she moved. Eyes the color of distant nebulae, violet, flecked with silver, regarded him with that familiar, unreadable calm. Her form seemed to shimmer subtly at the edges, never quite holding still, as if reality itself struggled to contain her. Delicate feet, each one tipped with 6 slender toes, made no sound against the deck plating. Rowan's finger tightened on the trigger, but something in her gaze, ancient and unyielding, held him back. "Rowan," she said, her voice soft but crystalline. "Lyra." He kept his weapon leveled, though the gesture felt more like ritual than threat. "I take it this isn't a coincidence." "The cell is mine," she replied, stepping closer. Every syllable resonated with certainty, a will honed by months of pursuit and counterplay. The air between them vibrated with more than the station's machinery. It crackled with rivalry, respect, and something deeper, something dangerous and magnetic. Rowan's lips twisted in a wry half-smile. He didn't raise his weapon higher. "Looks like we're at an impasse." A shadow of a smile tugged at Lyra's mouth, though her eyes never left his. "You're unpredictable. Toys and mirrors." She gave a slight, elegant shrug. "Hardly optimal." "But effective," he countered, letting a touch of mischief creep into his tone. Their words circled each other like dancers, half challenge, half invitation. They began to move, pacing slowly around the vault entrance, muscles coiled, every gesture measured and deliberate. The tension between them was palpable, coiling tighter with every step. Rowan watched the subtle shifts in her posture, the way her hands hovered just above the line of her hips, ready for anything. Beneath the surface of their rivalry, something else flickered, a recognition, a fascination that neither of them could fully name, a dangerous attraction, born in the heat of pursuit and the intimacy of matching wits. A low chime sounded from the vault controls, and for an instant, Rowan's attention flickered to the shifting lights on the security panel. That split second was all it took. Suddenly, the corridor was awash in crimson. Emergency strobes pulsed from the ceiling, painting Lyra's features in harsh relief. An automated voice, cold, mechanical, rang out. "Security override. All unauthorized personnel are targets. Lethal force authorized." Rowan's eyes darted back to Lyra, reading the question in her stance. "You're doing?" he asked, brow arched. "No," she replied, and for the first time her composure slipped. He saw it, a tremor in her voice, a flicker of uncertainty. Whatever was happening, it was out of her control, and that terrified her. With a hiss, the vault's reinforced door slid open, exhaling a gust of ionized air. The corridor filled with the heavy tread of armored boots. 6 Helion Dominion troopers stormed in, rifles raised, faces obscured by polarized visors. Their armor was matte black, trimmed in red, each movement precise and deadly. Their leader, taller than the others, with a voice like shattering glass, stepped forward and leveled his rifle at Lyra. "Agent Lyra, you are obsolete. Surrender the human and the cell." For a heartbeat, Lyra's world collapsed inward. Betrayal hit her like a physical blow, the force of it almost knocking her off her feet. She had dedicated cycles of her life to the Dominion, had trusted their mission, believed herself indispensable. Now, with a single phrase, she was cast aside. The troopers fanned out, weapons aimed at both Lyra and Rowan. One of them produced a gravitic charge, a disc pulsing with blue light, the kind of weapon that could flatten the vault and everyone in it. Rowan's mind raced, scanning for options, but then he spotted another figure cowering behind a service console, a technician, barely out of her teens, eyes wide with terror. Another variable, another life in the crossfire. As the charge began to whine, preparing to detonate, Rowan lunged forward. But Lyra was faster. With alien grace, she shoved him and the technician into a shielded alcove, her own body angling to cover them. Rowan glimpsed the flash of the gravitic charge as it detonated, felt the world buckle and scream, and then there was only darkness. When Rowan clawed his way back to consciousness, the world had changed. The corridor was a scorched ruin. The vault's reinforced door hung open at a drunken angle, the walls pitted and blackened. The stench of burning polymers and ozone filled the air. The Helion Dominion squad was gone, no bodies, just scorched footprints leading into the shadows. The terrified technician was gone too, leaving only a bloodied comm badge behind. And Lyra. Lyra lay in the debris, her starlight hair tangled with wiring, her suit torn and burned. Iridescent blood pooled beneath her, catching the emergency strobes and scattering fragments of rainbow across the twisted metal. Rowan crawled to her, panic rising like a tide. He pressed his fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, fluttering and fragile. For the first time, the truth slammed into him. How much she mattered. Adversary, enigma, obsession. All those roles dissolved, leaving only the ache of her presence, the fear that he might lose her. He brushed a lock of hair from her face, hands trembling. She stirred, eyelids fluttering, and whispered, "Status." He forced himself to focus, checking her wounds. Shards of composite alloy were embedded deep in her side and shoulder, each one leaking a thin trickle of shimmering blood. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin had lost much of its luminous sheen. Rowan's field training kicked in. He tore a strip from his own sleeve, pressing it to the worst of the wounds, fighting to keep her consciousness anchored. "Stay with me, Lyra. Don't you dare check out on me now," he murmured, voice rough with fear and something else. Something that felt too raw, too real. She gave a weak, almost imperceptible smile. "You're sentimental." "And you're impossible," he shot back, refusing to let go. He scooped her up, surprised by her weightlessness, like holding the memory of a star or the idea of light itself. For a moment, her head lolled against his chest, her fingers curling weakly around his arm. Cradling her close, Rowan staggered to his feet. The corridor behind them flickered with distant alarms. No time, no safety. With Lyra's life in his arms, he ducked through a half-collapsed service hatch, plunging into the station's forgotten conduits. The echoes of pursuit faded behind him, replaced by the frantic rhythm of his own heart and the desperate hope that somewhere, in the labyrinth of Veyron Station, they might find sanctuary, together. In a derelict maintenance hub, Rowan laid Lyra down under the flicker of a dying lamp. The air smelled of old coolant and machine oil, metal fatigue creaking through the floor grates. He knelt at her side, the battered medkit open beside him, hands already stained with spectral blood. Lyra's breathing was thin but steady, her eyes following his every move, violet, edged with pain and wariness. Rowan drew a compact blade from his boot, its edge catching the lamp's uneven glow. He met her gaze, voice low but unyielding. "This'll sting," he warned, pinning her gently with one arm. His touch was careful, but she could feel the tension in his body, the strain of urgency warring with his desire not to hurt her more than necessary. She gave a faint nod, her jaw set in defiance. Rowan sliced through the torn fabric of her suit, peeling it back to reveal the wounds beneath. Her skin, radiant and translucent, shimmered with light from within, like the surface of a moonlit lake, marred only by the shrapnel embedded deep. Blood welled from the cuts in spectral colors: blue, gold, violet, colors no human wound could produce. Rowan steadied her with one hand, bracing her shoulder as he angled the blade. The first shard came out with a wet, crystalline sound. Lyra didn't flinch, but her form wavered at the edges, light fracturing across her body as pain rippled through her. She hissed softly, her fingers tightening around the grated floor. Rowan worked quickly but with deliberate care, pulling the fragments free, tossing each bloody piece aside. With the worst of the shrapnel gone, he pressed a sterile patch to the largest wound. His hands were gentle, almost reverent, as if afraid she might vanish beneath his touch. Lyra's body shimmered as the patch bonded with her skin, nanofibers activating, sealing the bleeding. He exhaled slowly, tension draining from his face. Their closeness was electric. Months of pursuit and evasion, suspicion and rivalry, suddenly condensed into this raw, urgent intimacy. Sweat beaded at Rowan's brow. Lyra watched him in silence, her mind racing to reconcile the man who had outwitted her logic traps with the man now saving her life. She studied the angles of his face, the grit beneath his nails, the determined furrow of his brow. Rowan's reputation was all improvisation and calculated risk, yet here, his care was as methodical as any operation she had run. Lyra's mind reeled, caught between the sting of betrayal from her command and the unfamiliar warmth of trust in this irrational human. "They discarded me," she murmured, her voice stripped of all its usual poise. The admission felt heavier than her wounds. Rowan glanced at her as he wiped his blade clean on a rag. "Welcome to the real world," he replied, his tone dry but not unkind. "Loyalty's just a word people use when it's convenient." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that why you're here? Convenience?" The question lingered between them, sharp as any blade. He shook his head, sliding the knife back into his boot. "No. If I wanted convenient, I'd be halfway to the docks, not patching up someone who tried to lock me in a kill zone." He met her gaze, searching for something. "You asked why I'd risk it for a stranger." "Empathy," he said. "Not always rational, but it's what keeps us human. Or at least, me." Lyra absorbed that, her thoughts folding in on themselves. Empathy. It was a concept she understood in theory, but in practice, it defied algorithm. Her mind retraced the moments before the blast, her decision to shield Rowan, to shield the technician, to absorb the brunt of a charge she could have avoided. There had been no tactical value in it. Was it respect? Curiosity? Or had Rowan's chaos infected her logic, rewritten her programming in some subtle, irreversible way? She studied him as he hovered nearby, organizing the med kit, attention flickering to the maintenance hub's entry. His movements were fluid, instinctive. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't seem to expect any reward. He just kept going. The silence between them grew companionable, tinged with something tentative and new. Lyra's body mended slowly under the patch's influence, her shimmering blood receding, the pain dulling into a distant ache. She flexed her fingers experimentally, noting the difference. Rowan watched her from across the room, his own wounds less visible, but no less real. Nearly an hour passed. The station's life support systems hummed overhead, punctuated by the occasional crackle of static from a battered comms console. Rowan leaned over it, tuning into the open frequencies, his expression hardening as garbled voices cut through the white noise. "Listen to this," he called softly. Lyra pulled herself upright, cloak of hair falling around her shoulders. Rowan amplified the feed, and the truth unfolded in bits and pieces. Officers from both Solarian and Helion factions reporting in the same coded cadence, trading assets and status like market brokers. The supposed war was a farce, Lyra realized. There were no real battle lines, no righteous cause, only alliances shifting with the tides of profit. The conflict was staged, a spectacle to move markets, distract populations, and mask the true objective, the transfer of the quantum cell, the ultimate bargaining chip. Lyra's mind raced, fitting the pieces together with clinical efficiency. Her entire mission, the perfection she had prided herself on, had been a lie, her every move orchestrated to serve interests she could not even name. For a moment she felt hollow, her purpose stripped away. But then, Rowan's hand found hers, steady and warm, grounding her in the present. "Looks like we've both been played," he said. There was no bitterness in his voice, only a spark of something defiant. She turned her hand to intertwine their fingers, the gesture unfamiliar but strangely right. "So what now?" she asked, searching his face. "Now?" Rowan grinned, the old mischief returning to his eyes. "We make sure they don't get what they want." A new resolve settled between them. Lyra straightened, her injuries almost forgotten. "We intercept the cell transfer, disable the handlers." "Expose the fraud." Rowan nodded, his mind already whirring through possible entry points, patrol schedules, and escape routes. "You run the numbers, I'll improvise the chaos." Their teamwork was seamless, the lines between their strengths blurring. Lyra's precision mapped out the shifting patterns of patrols, their movement through the station's underbelly, a sequence of mirrored blind spots and Fibonacci-timed security sweeps. Rowan's intuition filled the gaps, spotting the human element, the unpredictable. Where she calculated, he felt. Where he guessed, she confirmed. Together, they planned a route to the cell's transfer point, a converging of intellect and instinct that neither could have devised alone. The intimacy of it was subtle at first, a hand brushing over a shared schematic, a murmur of approval at a clever feint, a smile traded in the low glow of the console. Each gesture built a bridge, necessity blending with something deeper. They rehearsed the critical moments, Rowan mocking up guard positions with scattered tools, Lyra recalibrating access codes with a few flicks of her slender fingers. Their conversation flowed, no longer adversaries but partners, each learning the other's rhythms. Rowan caught himself watching the play of light across her skin, the way her eyes lingered on him, curiosity morphing into trust. By the time the hub's clock chimed the next hour, a quiet certainty had settled between them. They were no longer two agents on opposite sides of a secret war, but something new, a union of logic and chaos, precision and empathy, forged in the crucible of betrayal. Outside, alarms still echoed in the distance, but inside the maintenance hub, a plan was taking shape, one built not just on survival, but on justice, and the strange, undeniable gravity pulling Rowan and Lyra together. The Lumina Junction pulsed with traffic, streams of grav cars weaving through the haze and neon glare. Below the city's blazing arteries, armored transports crawled along the underlevels, unmarked, but with the unmistakable menace of a convoy on high alert. Rowan crouched in the shadows above, his silhouette broken by flickering signage and the shifting beams of streetlights. His breath misted in the cool air, eyes tracking the convoy's progress as he worked his micro-console with practiced ease. A final keystroke, and a dozen traffic drones flashed hazard signals. The roads twisted, redirection gates swinging closed. The convoy's lead vehicle braked sharply, boxed in by a sea of stalled cargo haulers. Rowan smiled, satisfaction glinting in his eyes as the armored column veered into a dead end, a canyon of forgotten infrastructure and dim emergency strobes. On the far side of the snarl, Lyra drifted through the gloom like a phantom, her form half shadow, half radiance. Her wounds had faded, but she moved with a careful economy, a predator conserving strength. She pressed herself against a support pillar, eyes narrowed, watching the Helion troopers spill out of their vehicles, weapons drawn. The faintest twitch of her wrist sent a silent pulse rippling through the corridor. The rear escort froze, collapsing with a soft, synchronized thud. A second pulse shorted the lead, its engine whining into silence. The convoy's commander barked orders, confusion spreading through the ranks. With the escape routes blocked, the center vehicle, the one carrying the quantum cell, was suddenly alone and exposed. Rowan took his cue. He dropped from the scaffolding above, landing in a crouch, boots muffled on the battered decking. Moving fast, he slapped a microcharge onto the cargo hatch, the device's light flickering green as it armed. Above, Lyra slipped through a maintenance vent, sliding into the bay like a wraith. As the hatch hissed open, two guards snapped to alert. Lyra flowed down behind one, her fingers moving in a blur. A strike to the neck, a twist, and the guard crumpled silently. The other spun toward her, but Rowan surged forward, catching him with an elbow to the jaw. The man's weapon clattered away, and Rowan finished it with a sharp blow to the temple. The world shrank to the small, reinforced compartment. Together they seized the cell, a small, crystalline unit humming with impossible energy. Rowan tucked it into his vest as alarms erupted, red strobes casting the chamber in pulses of panic. Outside, chaos blossomed. Chaos. Helion troopers regrouped, energy bolts lancing through the half-light. Rowan darted for cover but snagged his leg in a tangle of exposed cabling. He cursed, struggling to free himself, the weight of the quantum cell dragging at his side. The Helion commander, eyes cold behind his visor, leveled a blaster at Rowan's heart. Time seemed to fracture, each heartbeat stretched thin. Then Lyra appeared, a streak of light and resolve. She leapt, her body arcing through the air, interposing herself between Rowan and the commander's aim. The energy bolt struck her shoulder, burning through suit and skin with a flash of violet light. She staggered, but did not fall. Rowan's instincts took over. He fired back, his own blaster flaring blue, dropping the commander. He hauled Lyra upright, looping an arm around her waist, the other gripping the precious cell. Together they plunged into a maintenance tunnel, alarms and gunfire echoing behind them. They stumbled through the underbelly of the city, sirens fading into the distance. The maintenance passage opened at last into the penthouse hideout, a space of glass, steel, and shadow perched high above the city's tangled veins. Rowan kicked the door shut, bolting it with trembling hands. Lyra leaned against the wall, breath ragged, her wound bleeding luminous streaks down her arm. Rowan dropped his gear, his face pale with fear and fury. He caught her as she sagged, guiding her to the battered couch by the window. His hands were rough but gentle as he tore open a med pack, disinfectant hissing against her wounded shoulder. "Hold still," he muttered, jaw clenched. She winced, but her gaze never left him. The city's glow painted patterns across her skin, highlighting the strange beauty of her injuries. Rowan's hands lingered on her jaw, thumb brushing the curve where flesh met starlight. The old distance between them was gone, replaced by an intimacy that made the air shimmer. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" she asked, the word trembling with confusion and something more. "You had the cell. You could have left me." Rowan paused, hand on her cheek, his thumb smearing a line of spectral blood. His voice came out rough, unguarded. "I don't abandon those who matter, and somewhere along the way, you became one of my people." The word struck her harder than any wound. In her world, people were assets, pieces to be moved and sacrificed as the mission demanded. But in Rowan's eyes, she saw none of that cold calculation. He saw her as a person, brilliant, broken, and real. She caught his hand, holding it to her cheek. "I don't understand you," she murmured. "You don't have to," Rowan replied, leaning in, his forehead pressing gently to hers. "Just stay with me, that's enough." Their first kiss was fierce and hungry, months of rivalry and longing igniting into something wild and undeniable. The boundaries between them dissolved. Logic and chaos, alien and human, adversary and ally, all replaced by heat and the pounding of desperate hearts. Lyra's arms encircled his neck, pulling him closer, her lips tasting of starlight and defiance. Rowan's hands traced the shifting lines of her body, memorizing the feel of her, anchoring himself to the only certainty left in his fractured world. Outside, the city glowed, a maze of secrets, corruption, and fragile hope. But within the penthouse, two fugitives found solace in each other's arms. They held on as if the world itself might end with the dawn. Before sunrise, they worked side by side, uploading the proof, evidence of the great corporate deception. Lyra's fingers flew across the console, encrypting files and routing them through a dozen proxies. Rowan broadcast the message to every public channel, watching as the feeds flickered to life across the cityscape. By morning, the city was in turmoil. Alarms blared in government towers, crowds gathered in the streets. The old powers crumbled beneath the weight of truth. Rowan and Lyra watched the chaos from their window, arms entwined, knowing their fight was not over, but that together they had changed the course of history. Aboard a nameless freighter, Lyra watched the news unfold in fractured, urgent bursts. The hollow screen above the galley table flickered with images of riots, resignations, and hastily convened tribunals, the aftershocks of a city changed forever by the leak she and Rowan had unleashed. The quantum cell, nestled in a shielded compartment beneath the floor, cast a soft, steady hum through the ship, a reminder of the chaos and possibility they carried with them. Rowan slept in the cabin, his breath slow and even, limbs tangled in a heap of threadbare blankets. A fresh scar slashed across his shoulder, pale and raised, a twin to the wound on Lyra's own body, a place where energy and flesh had collided, and where, for a heartbeat, she had chosen his life over her own. She traced her fingers over her own injury, feeling the ache beneath the surface, the memory of the penthouse hideout, their frantic escape, the heat of his touch, the desperate, passionate way they'd found each other amidst all the danger. For her kind, closeness had always been transactional, measured in alliances and obligations, never intimacy for its own sake. But with Rowan, the boundaries blurred. Closeness became transformative. She found herself craving the warmth of his hand, the unpredictable comfort of his presence, an unfamiliar longing that unsettled and excited her in equal measure. The freighter shuddered as it passed through a meteor drift, the engines humming in protest. Lyra settled deeper into the bench, eyes never leaving the stream of news. The old powers were falling, just as she and Rowan had intended, but new uncertainties were rising in their place. She wondered what shape the future would take, now that they had rewritten the rules. A rustle from the cabin signaled Rowan's return to consciousness. He emerged, shirtless, rubbing his shoulder, a lazy grin spreading across his face when he caught her watching him. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep and wry amusement. "We survived," she replied, arching an eyebrow as she nodded toward the hidden compartment. "And we have a very illegal quantum cell. Complicates things." He flopped into the seat across from her, stretching his legs until their knees touched. "Complicated beats dead, I always say." He tilted his head, studying her. "How are you holding up?" Lyra paused, considering the question as if it were a puzzle she had not solved before. Her body was healing, the patchwork of scars evidence of both pain and resilience. Her old life, her mission, her loyalty to Helion Command, was dust in the airlocks. In its place was a strange, open horizon. "My assessment is favorable," she said at last, the faintest hint of a smile playing at her lips. "You're an anomaly, Rowan. Your empathy, your stubbornness, these aren't flaws. They're strengths I could never engineer." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Their fingers entwined, warm and solid. Two worlds in contact, no longer adversaries but something far more improbable and precious. So what now, my logical, radiant warrior? Rowan asked, his thumb tracing gentle circles against her skin. Lyra looked at him, the future unwinding before her like a spiral of stars. Now we're free agents. The odds are intriguing. She leaned across the table, pressing her lips to his, a kiss soft and lingering, a promise instead of a farewell. The moment stretched, the noise of the world receding until only the hum of the freighter and the rhythm of their joined hearts remained. They spent the next hours hidden in plain sight, fugitives and outcasts, plotting their next move as the ship cut a silent path through the void. When the time came, Rowan eased the freighter into position, hands steady on the controls as Lyra recalibrated the jump drive. With a shudder, stars streaked past the viewport, and Veyron Station vanished behind them, reduced to memory and legend. For the first time in either of their lives, they were truly free. 6 months later, their names had faded from the news feeds, replaced by newer scandals and fresher betrayals. On Seraloon, a hidden world of lavender skies and endless meadows, they built a life far from the engines of war and conspiracy. Their fortune, hard-won and mostly untouched, bought them a modest cottage on a hillside overlooking twin sapphire lakes. Technology was kept to a minimum. The quantum cell, now inert, was buried beneath a stand of flowering trees. Their days were quiet, filled with simple joys neither had ever imagined. Rowan tending a garden of iridescent flowers, his hands learning to shape and nurture instead of sabotage. Lyra wandering the hills, cataloging new species of birds, her senses attuned to beauty for its own sake, not for strategic advantage. Sometimes they would ride out to the farthest cliffs and watch the dawn together, saying nothing, content in the presence of the other. In the evenings, as the twin moons rose, silvering the world outside their window, they would talk for hours, about the past, about the uncertain future, about the strange alchemy of love and loss that had made them who they were. One evening, as a warm breeze carried the scent of night-blooming vines through the cottage, Lyra broke a long, thoughtful silence. "I've been experiencing emotional glitches," she admitted, her voice quiet, almost shy. Fluctuations in mood, spikes in attachment, unpredictable desires. For so long, I believed these were errors, bugs in my programming. Rowan looked at her, his eyes gentle, patient. "Feelings aren't errors," he said, moving closer. "They're what make us real. I used to think I had to bury mine to survive, but they're what kept me going. After I lost my old crew, after the war, I tried to cut out all the grief, all the memory, but it just made me hollow." He reached for her hand, drawing her fingers to his lips. "Feelings remind you you belong, even the painful ones. Especially the painful ones." Lyra hesitated, then touched the faint scar on his shoulder, tracing its curve with a reverence that surprised her. Rowan mirrored her gesture, his palm warm on her own scar, the contact sending sparks through both of them. Their marks, proof of what they had survived together, proof that they had chosen each other when it mattered most. Their kiss was slow, deep, a celebration, not of desperation, but of everything unpredictable and wonderful about being alive. The passion was there, fierce as ever, but now layered with something softer, steadier, hope. In the darkness, with the moons rising outside and the future unwritten, they chose each other, not because they had to, but because, after all the chaos and pain, they wanted to. And as the night deepened around them, Seraloon spun quietly on, cradling two souls remade by love, free at last, together, beneath a sky full of promise. Their peace shattered with a single chime, a sharp, unfamiliar note cutting through the hush of the Seraloon evening. The sound was wrong for this place, too urgent for their quiet life. Instantly they moved. Rowan rolled from the workbench where he'd been tinkering with the flyer's propulsion core, muscles tensed, every reflex honed by years on the run. Lyra was already gliding to the wall console, her presence a shimmer of alertness in the fading light. Her fingers danced across the screen, eyes flickering with the cool focus that once made her a legend on Veyron Station. The perimeter scan resolved. A single life sign, approaching their cottage on foot. A human, unarmed, credentials flagged in the old security net Rowan had almost forgotten. Not a squad, not an attack. Just one visitor. Rowan eased the charge from his blaster, but didn't holster it. Lyra nodded at him, and together they opened the door. The man who stood on their porch looked smaller than Rowan remembered. Less a frightened technician now, more composed, his shoulders squared, eyes bright with conviction. He still wore the Astral Dynamics badge, though it had been modified, the old corporate insignia replaced by a stylized rising sun. He took a deep breath, then offered a nervous smile. "Thank you for letting me in, and for what you did back there. Veyron, the cell, exposing the lie. You saved my life, and so many others." His gaze flicked from Rowan to Lyra. "The world's different now, because of you." Lyra studied him, her expression unreadable, all old habits alive beneath her calm. "You took a risk coming here," she said quietly. He nodded. "I know, but I had to. I'm not with Astral Dynamics anymore. None of us are. After the collapse, a group of us, scientists, engineers, some ex-Union, some Helion, formed something new. The Horizon Initiative. We want to chart a better course. Not just profit, not exploitation. Exploration, ethics, transparency." He paused, gathering himself. "We need a team like you, not saboteurs, pioneers. Not for destruction, but discovery. I'm offering you purpose, if you want it." Rowan looked past the visitor, out to the wild meadows and lavender sky, the half-built flyer gleaming in the dusk. He saw the familiar tools scattered by the door, the garden where Lyra sometimes lingered, the rooms that had become their sanctuary. He felt the weight of months spent in peace, felt, too, the restless ache that had begun to stir just beneath the surface. He turned to Lyra. She was watching him, the calculation in her posture shifting, tension and curiosity warring across her features. He knew her well enough now to see it. The peace here had been sweet, but the silence was starting to itch. They had healed, but they were not made for stillness. She felt it too. Rowan's lips quirked in a crooked smile. "I suppose the universe was always going to come knocking." The technician's eyes shone with hope. "Will you come? There's a ship, Aurora, crewed by those who want something better. There's a nebula, unexplored, signals, anomalies, the unknown." Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft but strong. "What would our role be?" "Whatever you make it," the technician replied. "Lead, advise, pilot, protect. It's all new out there." Rowan extended his hand, shaking the technician's. "We'll consider it." "Give us a night." The visitor smiled, relief and excitement mingling on his face. "Thank you. I'll wait by the river in the morning." He left, vanishing into the violet dusk. Rowan closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. "Well," he said, "so much for retirement." Lyra moved to his side, her hair catching the last rays of sunset, her luminous eyes softening. "You miss it," she observed. "The uncertainty, the challenge." Rowan shrugged, a rueful grin spreading across his face. "Maybe. Not the running, not the hiding, but making a difference? Fighting for something real?" He shook his head. "I don't want to go back to who I was, Lyra. But maybe we could be more." She nodded, stepping into his embrace. "We're not fugitives anymore, Rowan. We're not broken." Her lips brushed his ear, words a whisper only he could hear. "We could be explorers, together." He pulled her close, forehead resting against hers, the air between them alive with hope and apprehension. "What about Sarah Loon?" he asked quietly. "What about this?" Lyra glanced around their home, the worn furniture, the garden, the quiet. "This will always be a part of us, but I want to see what's beyond the horizon." He kissed her then, slow and sure. "Then let's go see." The next morning they packed lightly, just essentials and mementos, no more than would fit in two small duffels. Rowan stowed his toolkit and Lyra's field journal beside the battered med kit that had saved both their lives. Together they walked to the river, the sun rising on a world they had called home, but not forever. The aurora waited in a clearing, sleek and luminous beneath the sky, its hull gleaming with promise. The technician greeted them, his joy barely contained as he led them up the ramp. The bridge of the aurora was quiet, starlight spilling over the controls in a tapestry of promise and mystery. The crew greeted them with nods and murmured welcomes, diverse, united by purpose rather than flag. Rowan took in the soft hum of the engines, the expanse of the stars beyond the glass. He felt Lyra's presence beside him, anchoring him as always. Lyra settled into the navigator's seat, fingers moving with practiced confidence. She scanned the sensors, plotted their first course, a faint shifting anomaly deep in an uncharted nebula. Numbers flowed across the display, probabilities and variables dancing in her mind. She glanced at Rowan, a rare smile curving her lips. "Probability of success is 48.1%. Rowan covered her hand with his own, his grin infectious. "Sounds about right." He squeezed her fingers, feeling the old thrill, the promise of risk, the certainty of partnership, the unknown beckoning. Around them, the bridge filled with quiet anticipation. Lights dimmed, the engines wound up, energy gathering in the aurora's core. Outside, the stars stretched into streaming lines, the universe opening before them. Rowan and Lyra shared one last look, no longer fugitives, no longer outcasts. Partners, lovers, explorers, together they leapt into the unknown, ready to face whatever waited among the stars, a team at last, ready for anything. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.